Early voting has begun across America. I have seen on Facebook today where a number of my friends, particularly in Georgia, have already withstood 5 and 6 hour lines to make sure that their voices are heard. Tonight, we're going to discuss that. We also will talk about the stimulus package that is currently being debated in Congress. Will it be passed or not? With the news that over 800,000 Americans have filed for first-time unemployment benefits just in the last 10 days, it is crucial that such a package gets passed quickly and signed by the president. We also want to talk a little bit tonight about the coronavirus second wave that we're hearing a lot about. We recognize that President Trump, as well as nearly 40 members of his inner circle, already have tested positive, and yet there still remains a very cavalier attitude across the country about just that. And then we're going to finish up with one of the biggest news topics of the week. Amy Coney Barrett right now is undergoing the Senate confirmation hearings in Washington, D.C. What will that mean if she is confirmed, especially with the Affordable Care Act being in peril, possibly with a case that will appear before the court the week after the election? So with that, I've invited a part of my crew. It is SpelHouse Homecoming week, but unfortunately, because our colleges take the coronavirus very seriously, there is no football being played this fall. Therefore, we will have no homecoming, but we're going to have a mini homecoming set this evening with Ursula Holmes, Corey Smith, Ayanna Hawkins, and as always, my friend Joy Stevens. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
All right. Good. Go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk about, though, today is that October 12th is considered by some in this country as Columbus Day. I don't celebrate Columbus Day. It's Indigenous Peoples Day to me. And the only Christopher that we celebrate, and I posted it on Facebook like millions of other Black people, is Christopher Biggie Smalls Wallace. With that, I want to start off with a light question. When did each of you first figure out that the entire Columbus discovered America thing was bunk? How old were you? And what are your thoughts about the entire debate that is erupting right now as to whether it should still be a federal holiday or whether it should morph into an Indigenous People Day? I'm going to start with you, Ayanna, because I saw a very poignant post on your Facebook page earlier today about the topic.
All right. Yes. So when did I first discover the truth? So I must have been in maybe about high school. And it wasn't that, okay, so I don't think that my high school was necessarily as progressive in terms of talking about Indigenous people, but I think that perhaps one of the history lessons that I got might have illuminated sort of more of the issues faced by those Indigenous people who were here already in the country, who were affected by the colonization or the settling. So, the way that we were taught that, of course, Columbus, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, blah, blah, blah. But then when you get sort of further along, they start talking about the settlements that were here. And I think it was sort of understanding the truth about what happened. So, for example, in Roanoke, there was a perspective that suggested, well, the Roanoke colony was a failure. But then you have to go behind that and sort of understand, well, why was the Roanoke colony a failure? Was it a failure because they didn't do well, or they said, oh no, we were under attack? And then you start to sort of put two and two together, I felt, and that was kind of how I came to this realization. So what's the next part? How do I feel now? Obviously now, I don't celebrate Columbus Day. It's just a day off. And so when we started sort of discussing it as Indigenous People Day, I certainly do feel more comfortable acknowledging not only the legacy of those who were here, understanding what that means to us as a country today. And then, of course, the legacy, I think one of the things I alluded to in my post is the fact that you have 26 states that are named after Indigenous people or that come from Indigenous names. We have, all sorts of natural resources that are named for Indigenous people. And then I was thinking back earlier today, back to when the president did his fireworks display back at Mount Rushmore, how there was some history even there, where that was land that had been taken and land that had been sort of taken and then used for the purpose of creating that monument. And so then understanding, well, no, that wasn't something that they bought, that's something they took. And then sort of this idea of acknowledging that history of the settling of America, the colonization of America, has this this sinister this sinister backstory that we have to tell the truth in order for us to move forward.
Hey man, Corey, what's your thoughts about that, brother?
Good evening, y'all. Glad to be on again with you, Chuck, and crew. For me, it was sometime in high school as well. There wasn't a definitive moment I can always you know, as a kid, you always know that something's wrong. You know, even if it's not being taught to you specifically, you can almost feel that something isn't right. And I guess my woke process per se probably started around around 12th grade with the advent of Public Enemy's "Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back." I started listening to that tape religiously, and I would hear different things in there, made me think about some things. And one of the things that never made sense to me was, what you'll hear commonly today, which is, how can you discover something and there are people here? And I never understood that. It just never clicked with me. And why are we celebrating this guy when, there were millions of people here already? And then you go back into, your world history class, and I guess that was 10th grade. And they talk about the ancient Aztecs and the ancient Mayans and the ancient Incas, and we study those civilizations. But somehow Columbus came here, 1,000 years later and discovered them. So then obviously when we got to Morehouse, it was, a little bit more formalized on the educational part of it. So I would say that it started for me in high school right around that time. As for now, no, I don't celebrate it. I teach my kids that, Columbus was, I teach them the truth, that he was basically somebody who got lost, never set foot in North America. And he didn't discover anything. He basically colonized the quote unquote New World. So, it's to the point now with my 13-year-old daughter, who's in 8th grade. She's been, and I just found this out, she just told me this recently, that she's been getting in trouble almost every year on Columbus Day because she always asks the question, how can you discover something and there are people there? So, and I tell her, keep on speaking that truth. And to the extent you'll get in trouble, we'll back you up and we'll defend you. And don't worry about it. Just keep speaking the truth, because I don't want her to have that, aha moment. I want her to always know the truth. So
understood. Understood, brother. Joy, Ursula, either one of you want to take a stab at this first topic? I see Joy.
Joy talking, and her mic is not even on.
Every podcast, one person just like, so I'll take my lump. I can tell you that I did not understand the history behind Columbus until I got to college. The Texas educational system, even though I went to a magnet school, it was one of the best schools in Houston, Texas. It prepared us very well from a science, math, liberal arts, etc. standpoint, but didn't cover history beyond. I can tell you all about the state of Texas. I still know my Texas history, but I didn't hear or even really understand the problems associated with Christopher Columbus until I got to college. And I went to Spelman College and I took my African diaspora class, and the teacher, in teaching us about the inception of the United States, she went over that. And I was like, wait, what? Because my sister, actually today is my sister's birthday. She was born on October 12th. And so I always knew my sister was born on Columbus Day. And she used to joke that her birthday was a holiday. That's pretty much as far as we care to know. And I think that's a big part of it. What do you care to know? What do you really understand? And what do you just accept because it's not your problem? It doesn't pertain to you. And so that was my first feeling of being, like you said, being awakened, being woke, like, whoa, this is something that I should have known. Now it makes sense why all of these cities and rivers and states, et cetera, have all these names. People were here before, and Thanksgiving is a whole lot. There were no, there was no just, oh, they came and helped us and everybody was happy and we had a turkey. And no, that ain't how that went. So yes, this is Indigenous Peoples Day. It's a day of remembrance for what has happened to them. This is not a day to celebrate a dude who got lost, and then when he did run into people, wrote in his own journals, these folks is weak and we can take them. That was Christopher Columbus.
Amen. Ursula, bring up the rear on that first topic.
You all always make me feel special, and that's because I'm from Mound Bayou, Mississippi. It's the oldest all-Black town in the country, and so I didn't grow up with some of this nonsense that you all grew up with. We didn't really talk about Christopher Columbus. We talked about I.T. Montgomery and Benjamin T. Green, who co-founded Mound Bayou. We talked about Eyes on the Prize and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer, people who actually came to Mound Bayou on a regular basis. We talked about Booker T. Washington. We didn't talk about Christopher Columbus. So quite honestly, you know, I kind of knew a little bit about the fact that they said he discovered America, but you know, there was never a real emphasis on any of that when I was growing up. And quite honestly, I'm thankful for that. But I can tell you about Reconstruction. I can tell you about the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. That's stuff that I learned. And I'm just so grateful that that's how I grew up, because when I got to Spelman, I was already as proud as I could possibly be to be Black. And Spelman just reinforced that, you know, I'm Black and I'm happy about it. And what's really interesting about it is when people meet me, Chuck, they know two things. They know Ursula went to Spelman College and she's from Mound Bayou, Mississippi. And if you don't know about Mound Bayou, Mississippi, just go to the museum in DC and check it out. There's a whole exhibit about my town.
Amen. Amen. And with that, I'm cut out the same cloth. I'm very grateful that my parents did not spare me the real with regards to Jim Crow, racism, slavery. They were very real with me and my sisters on the topic. And so therefore, I grew up too with a full understanding of what was real and what was not. And what I often was told by my parents was, when being in class, give those teachers what it is that they want. If they want you to say this, Columbus discovered America in 1492, put it down on the paper. And that was before I actually went to FAMU High. Once I got there, I was with kindred spirits as my parents. So I no longer had to fake and flodge about what the right answers were to subjects like that. But I understood early on to wear the mask, so to speak, which is say what you have to say to keep the good grade and then keep it on moving and then continue to share the real with other people. Folks, I want to talk about something.
Oh, Chuck, one thing before we go on.
Sure.
I know you all celebrate Christopher Wallace, but me and the ladies, especially in the 80s, we celebrated Christopher Williams. At least the 80s and 90s, Christopher Williams. We celebrated him. So, you know, just wanted to throw that out parenthetically that, you know, Christopher Wallace wasn't the only Christopher we celebrate.
No, I totally understand that. What's funny about that is I got roasted about 2 or 3 months ago. Ursula, I think you led the roast on Facebook when I said that, and I'm a Christopher Williams fan too. I'm not one of those brothers that hates on him, but from a music standpoint, I thought he was a great singer. But at the same time, I never knew that he sang that song in '89. I talked to myself. I had no clue, you know, but I got dogged out and dragged all night long about, how did you not know that? You must have been like, no, I'm not one of those haters. I mean, I'm a leader of Team Dark Skin, but I don't have no problem with the non-melanated brothers either. We're all Black. So
one time for the halfway light skinned brothers.
Right. It's all good, right? So with that in mind, folks, topic number 2 this evening, the coronavirus second wave. Now, a week and a half ago, I had no idea that we were going to have the type of week that we did. I mean, first, President Donald Trump says that he has it. Hope Hicks had it. His wife, Melania Trump, has it. I think about 36 members of his inner circle are currently sick with the coronavirus or are now saying that they are no longer sick because they have passed through the requisite 10 to 14 days that it takes for quarantine. Now, I did notice that when the president first got sick, week before last, he had a mask on as he was getting on Marine One to go out to Walter Reed. And in the time since, I have seen him in a couple of appearances, at least once or twice, have on the mask, even if he ultimately removes the mask. And yet you still see from a lot of Republicans across the country this reticence to actually wear masks and actually participate in social distancing. And again, I can't even necessarily make it political on that, because I see quite a few Black folks that I know probably are Democrats too, that are walking around without masks as if they don't have a care in the world. So I want to jump into that first and foremost. I've noticed this evening when I was watching Wolf Blitzer that they are saying upwards of 30 states are surging with the coronavirus. With Corey, I'm coming to you first. Florida potentially being the epicenter once again. The experts are saying that within the next 4 to 6 weeks with Governor DeSantis opening back up everything as if nothing is wrong, that we could be at epidemic type numbers in regards to deaths. Corey, talk to me a little bit about DeSantis, his desire to open back up Florida for business, and what type of impact that could have on our people, particularly Black people who seem to be more susceptible to this disease.
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, DeSantis obviously wants to be Trump, little Trump. I think it's political for him and economic, because he doesn't want a sagging economy in this state with an election coming up. And I guess he's up for re-election in the midterm, I believe. So, he's trying to shore up every argument he can shore up in terms of having a good economy. Hey, we were the first ones to open up. We showed everybody. We showed the way. When the reality of it is that it's a lunatic's position, and he's put all 22 million of us in this state at risk. There's a lot of fatigue surrounding this coronavirus and how we have to kind of stay at home and stay away from people. We, especially this part of the year, where season is coming in, my Canadian neighbors are starting to come back, to their winter homes, and people want to get out. It's been a crazy year. And that's understandable. I have the urge myself. However, I think that we, especially as Black people, need to be a little bit more mindful of the science on this. The fact that, maladies that always plague us a little bit more than the general population, we need to observe that. We need to watch our health. We need to, take all the medicines you're supposed to be taking and stay home. We see, and Chuck, this, we're Gators. After that ridiculous loss to Texas A&M over the weekend, Coach Mullen is talking about he wants the swamp to be full of people. And I'm sitting there like, don't listen to that. That's foolishness. Stay home. Watch the game on TV. Listen to it on the radio. Do what you got to do, but stay away from, crowds of people. And it's just flabbergasting. It's amazing to me. When I ride around town and I see people just out, Black, white, and people are just out, man. I actually had to go to Miami last week for some work related business, and I took a ride. I can't go to Miami without taking a ride through Miami Beach. And people were out there as well. So the idea or the notion that we're going to be in the epicenter again is probably well founded based on my anecdotal observations. And it's going to be sad, man. And I just hope that people are a little bit more smart about it.
Joy, what are your thoughts with regards to what we can do to encourage people, particularly Black people? I mean, all people, but definitely Black people. I mean, it's one of those things where when the numbers are showing that we are more susceptible to not only getting the disease, but actually dying from it, what more can we do at this point to reinforce the need to wear masks and to maintain proper social distancing?
There's nothing more that we can do outside of holding people down and taping a mask to their face. We've reached a point where either you do it or you don't. And the reasons that people don't, again, one of my favorite concepts is cognitive dissonance. People have something they want to believe. They want to believe it's safe outside. They want to believe that we're going to go back to our old way of life. Even though this morning I read an article that said Microsoft is moving people to working from home permanently. They're like, we out. This is what we're doing from now on. More companies are probably going to start doing that. The world as we know it has changed. It hasn't ended, but it's changed. And so many people resist change. They want to pretend it's okay. This is the equivalent of, one of my favorite old movies was Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail. And there's a knight in there where they cut the knight's arm off. And he's like, I'm still fighting. They cut his arm off. I'm going to kick you. They cut his leg off. He's like, it's just a flesh wound. Total denial about the reality of the situation. Bro, you lost 3 limbs. And he's like, I'll make a comeback. You just don't want to believe what is right in front of your face. And there's nothing that anyone can do to convince you otherwise, outside of God. When you get there and he tells you, I thought I told you, this your own fault. I do think that it's partially political, but it's not completely political, because you have people on both sides of or all the way across the political spectrum that think, some people think, we're all going to get it eventually. Let's just go ahead and do herd immunity and everybody just go outside and, lick each other and catch it, which is dumb. Don't do that. But then you also have people that this is a hoax. It's not that bad. The president had it and he got better. So even the older demographic that's supposed to be vulnerable, they're not really vulnerable because look at him, even though I'm not really sure how he's going to turn out. And again, if you don't want to hear it, you won't. It's a different form of prejudice, which is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Shout out to Nathan Rustine for my favorite quote. If you just don't want to hear it, there's nothing else I can do for you other than keep you 6 feet away with a pole if I have to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Ayanna, I want to throw this part of the question at you. I noted earlier today that 800,000 Americans in the last week have applied for unemployment benefits for the very first time. Those are pretty critical numbers, especially with us having fewer than 22 days left before Election Day. The conventional wisdom has always been that if the economy is pretty strong, that inures a benefit to the incumbent. Whereas if the economy is not so strong, usually that bodes well for the challenger. With that in mind, how do you see this playing out as a campaign issue over the next 21 days? Do you think that this will provide a boost to the Biden-Harris campaign? Or do you think some people may fear switching horses midstream or mid-race, so to speak, and stick with Trump moving forward? What are your thoughts, Ayanna?
So I'm of two minds. I think the first thing is the idea that, okay, if our economy is doing poorly, like you said, you decide you're going to change, you're going to try for a change. That was the Bill Clinton playbook back in 1992. I don't think people remember that. I mean, he said it's the economy, stupid. And if people are looking for work and then you're seeing, let's look at the example of the president. The president has at his disposal the best medical care possible. Socialized medicine, even though he doesn't call it that, is government medicine, but he has the best, and also experimental medicine. He and his people are going to be fine. I'm more than sure, and I, can't guarantee this, that you're not going to hear about any deaths coming from anyone who was infected from the White House, because they're all have access to the best care in the world. Whereas the rest of us are looking at, our pocketbooks, we're looking at our businesses, we're looking at the fact that you can't get unemployment, all these other things, and you just start to, in your head, start to think, well, if I stick with with the current status quo, this could go on. And he also said that he wasn't going to negotiate. I think that he backtracked a little bit, but he was not going to negotiate another relief package. So if I am a person who is, down and out, I'm looking at these numbers, I'm looking at not only the unemployment, but looking at these infection rates. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at the other side to see what they're offering, particularly since they're offering a plan. They're offering a plan not only for trying to control the virus, but also offering economic ideas that could possibly move us forward. And then, I'm thinking that when we did this back in 2008, when Biden was the vice president, we already saw what they did. They were able to rescue the economy. They brought back the auto industry. They brought back other industries. So I might be willing to switch if I were not already undecided. I mean, I'm decided, but if I were undecided, I would definitely look at that, look at his track record, look at the fact that the other folks, they're going to keep on going and they're going to be fine, point blank.
No, absolutely. And Ursula, toward that end, earlier this week, there were some reports out of Central Florida. There's an area near Orlando, north of Orlando, called the Villages. It's a series of very tony retirement communities, for lack of a better word, where the majority of the citizens there trend Republican. It's a red part of the state of Florida. And due to the fact that the average age is in excess of 55 there, some of the reports hailing forth out of the Villages is that there is almost an even split in that area, with Biden-Harris signs to Trump-Pence signs. Now, like Corey was saying earlier, that's anecdotal evidence, but I have mentioned before on previous shows that back in 2016, when I was doing some cases down in the Sanford area, where the president was actually earlier today for a rally, most of the I-4 corridor, which runs from Daytona westward to Tampa, is a pretty reliably blue area in the state of Florida. And back in 2016, I was surprised when traveling along I-4 and into the smaller enclaves like Sanford, all that I saw as far as the eye could see was Trump-Pence, Trump-Pence. And now I'm hearing that that is balancing out. With that in mind, do you think that older voters who tended to vote for Donald Trump in 2016, for whatever reason, maybe it could be not wanting to have a woman as president, maybe it was because they just did not like Hillary Clinton, do you see some of those voters potentially being turned off by the Trump-Pence ticket this time based upon its handling of the coronavirus pandemic, and potentially because of its persistent attacks on the Affordable Care Act, which could eliminate pre-existing illness protection for the insured? What are your thoughts on that, Ursula?
I think it depends on who they trust. unfortunately, we have more information than we can deal with at this point. I mean, and so it really just depends on what they believe. And at this point, whatever your position is, you can find something either in the news or on the internet to support it, whatever it is, including that Biden is really dead and, you know, that it's a robot. I'm pretty sure something out there that would support that claim. Because at this point, you know, there's just so much misinformation out there. It's difficult to figure out what people trust. So I think for a lot of people, it will come down to what they believe. If they believe some of the stuff the CDC has said, then they may go for Trump. They may say that, you know, this whole pandemic has been blown out of proportion. I saw somebody today actually posting the mortality rates for heart disease and cancer versus, you know, what has happened with coronavirus to diminish the impact that coronavirus has had on this country. So it really just depends on what they believe, unfortunately. And quite honestly, I think a lot of people won't say one way or another for fear of backlash, how they're going to vote. And we won't know until election day. I think it speaks volumes, though. I read some article at some point that said that at one point, Trump in 2016 had 38 major donors from Fortune 500 companies, and I think now he's down to 6. And I think that speaks volumes to, you know, I think people are really fed up. I can't see how Fortune 500 companies wouldn't be fed up with him. And I'm hoping that there are a lot of Americans out there that are just as fed up with him as we are, because we need to bring this to a close. You know, I think there was an assumption that he was going to be like the rest of the Republicans and just, you know, forward the agenda that, you know, Republicans typically did. But there's nothing typical about Donald Trump other than, you know, unless you're looking at narcissism, you know, a mental illness. You know, he's textbook when it comes to that, but, you know, he's not the typical Republican.
Right. I thought it was interesting too, gang, when we realized that Martha McSally started backtracking a little bit from President Trump in her race against Mark Kelly. When you realize that you start to see Republican Senate candidates afraid that they are going down the drain by attaching themselves to the president, that too does not necessarily bode well for the GOP in the next 3 weeks. But again, we will see. We can prognosticate all that we wish. We can read the tea leaves. But at the end of the day, what it really comes out at the end of the day is people voting and turning out. And I do know, and we all know, that generally speaking across America, there are more registered Democrats in most states than there are Republicans. I think there was record registration in Georgia this time around from what I was reading this weekend. And with that in mind, if those people who have registered for the first time actually show up and vote, that could bode well, not just for the presidential race, but also the race with our Morehouse brother, Raphael Warnock, who is in a tight battle with Kelly Loeffler for the Senate, as well as Jamie Harrison, who is in a very tight race with Lindsey Graham. I mean, who would have thought even a year ago that a Democrat, a Black Democrat, could potentially unseat Lindsey Graham? Again, it just goes to show that 2020 has been something else and amazing. One last issue on this subject before we go on to the next one. With the coronavirus having hit the Trump administration and his inner circle so strongly, do you think that Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris have made the right decisions with regards to either the plexiglass with the Harris-Pence debate last week, or Joe Biden indicating, hey, yes, I will do a Zoom with you, or I will keep my distance, but I'm not going to get on stage with you right now? There are some Republicans who are saying that's cowardice. There are a lot of Democrats who are throwing back saying, no, that's common sense, the other C word, which is you don't want to expose yourself to somebody else's bad germs. Anybody want to take a stab at that before we move to the next subject? Uh-oh, Joy's saying me. She looks like she's wide open. Go ahead, sis.
Okay, without using any words that would get me banned on public television, miss me with that bovine fecal matter. Okay? It is ridiculous to dare someone to jump off a bridge with nothing but rocks below and then call them a coward for failing to put their own lives in danger. That's dumb. That is absolutely ridiculous. And again, they haven't said they won't debate. They haven't said that they are not willing to engage with the other party. Let's just do it in a respectful way. Let's put up some plexiglass. I might have it, you might have it. Let me protect you from me as well. Let's all be safe and use some common sense. And to say that common sense is cowardice, to say that everybody and their mama, literally everybody and their mama, is doing Zoom right now. Why is that not a viable option? The reason I think it's not is because you can mute mics on Zoom. If you are the moderator, if you're the host, you can just shut somebody down. And if you go back to that first debate, if they had had the ability to cut mics, it would have gone much differently. And I think it's one thing to, again, you remember back in high school where you put your shoulder against somebody and say, come on, man, make your move. I believe that is what the Republican Party is doing right now. They don't want that smoke, but they want to act like they do. But the minute nobody's standing there with them, you running. No, that's not what we're doing. I'm not going to put my life in danger just to prove a point to you because I don't have to. You want to meet me on some common sense terms with some plexiglass or a full virtual debate where we both have 2 minutes uninterrupted for real? Let's do that. No. I'm not doing that because you a coward. No, you a fool. That's what you are. There's no way I would do that.
Amen. And with that, perfect time to segue into topic 3. One of our birth year mates for most of us who were born in 72, some of us on the panel were, Amy Coney Barrett. She is up for the United States Supreme Court. She graduated in high school in 90, like some of us, graduated from Rhodes College in 1994. The president took some heat this weekend because he introduced her a few weeks ago, not this weekend, but over the last few weeks, he's introduced her as a Rhodes Scholar. But she was not a recipient of the Cecil Rhodes Scholarship that takes you to Oxford. She was a graduate of Rhodes College, I believe, in Tennessee. And then she has served as a United States Appeals Court judge here since 2017. She's kind of in a pickle because, as many of the lawyers, Joy, I think you're the only non-lawyer here who has not gone into a courtroom and practiced at some point in time on the panel. You all know that what it comes down to is what really gets you in trouble is what you write and what you say. And unlike other people who have been vetted for appellate positions and or the United States Supreme Court in years past, potential Justice Coney Barrett has made some very sharp remarks with regards to Roe v. Wade. And so I have found it interesting to see where there are some who are trying to indicate that there are people criticizing her because she's a Catholic. Problem with that is that there have been other Catholics and there are a number of Catholics already on the United States Supreme Court. So I don't think that is as much of an issue as you're hearing from the right. The issue is that she has some on-record commentary about Roe versus Wade. What are you all expecting out of the confirmation hearings this week? And do you anticipate that she will be confirmed once the full Senate takes a vote? Who wants to start off with that? I see Ursula moving to unmute. Go ahead, Ursula.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, she will be confirmed. The Republicans are very clear that they want to be held to a different standard than the one that they expected the rest of us to be held to. I still just can't get over all the hoopla in 2016 when President Obama was trying to replace Scalia. And I mean, we were 10 months out and, they had, conniption after conniption about the notion that he would actually think about confirming somebody. And Ginsburg passes away less than 2 months from the presidential election, and they're pushing it through. I have been just incredibly disappointed at, the integrity of those that are serving in the Senate that are Republicans, that, they would sit back and allow this to happen after everything that they said, after everything that they said in 2016. In terms of Coney Barrett, what tickles me, Chuck, is I believe that fool actually believed that Rhodes Scholars were people who graduated from Rhodes College. I really do. I mean, you can't tell me otherwise. He really thought that's what it meant. So I'm not surprised by that at all. And quite honestly, I'm not surprised. I expect her to go through. If you'll remember the confirmation hearings for Ginsburg, she was very vocal about her position with respect to Roe v. Wade. So, I'm expecting them to say, hey, you didn't have an issue with Ginsburg saying that she supported upholding Roe v. Wade, so you shouldn't have an issue with this woman saying that she opposes it. So, it'll go through. And I'm just hoping they'll expand the Supreme Court once, we become normal again.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And Joy, I see you. Ayanna, what are your thoughts about the confirmation hearings this week with Coney Barrett?
So having watched this issue and having worked on several nominations, I mean, I agree with Ursula. Yes, she is definitely going to get through, which is unfortunate. But the other thing is, you mentioned the issue of integrity. And what we have seen time and time again, when we go back to 2016, it's never been about integrity. It's never been about fairness. It's always been about maintaining power. So even when they say that she's well qualified, which is, suspect, because she's only been on the court for 3 years, on the circuit for 3 years. And mind you, she was on the circuit because they did not allow any of Obama's nominations to go through, where he had all these vacancies. They made a big issue about the vacancies. So everything that we talk about in terms of like where fairness is supposed to be, it's never fair. It's always whenever they are in a position of power, they're going to use it to always maintain that power. And they searched around and they found someone who was going to uphold that same idea, that same legacy of power. So I'm not going to be surprised. So what I'm hoping for is not necessarily, I'm hoping for what happens after this nomination. I mean, obviously, that's the reason why we're saying not only do you need to vote and show up, you need to think about voting down ballot. We've already mentioned Senate races. That's why those races are important, because, we need the people that are going to the next round of vacancies and the next round of judges and the next justice, hopefully will be nominated and confirmed by those who will be in power, who will in fact use fairness and will use a better barometer of a person's qualifications than just trying to change the rules.
Indeed. One of the things that was funny, and I sent an article to each of you earlier today in our chat, is that 4 years ago, when Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were coming down the last stretch of their race, there were a number of Republicans that were actively promoting the idea that the Supreme Court should remain at a 4-4 split, because as you remember, as Ursula alluded to earlier, when Scalia died, President Obama nominated Merrick Garland, and Senator Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and the whole crew, they stalled, and did not allow that nomination to go through, with Graham infamously saying that he believed that it should wait for the next president to be able to select. And what was interesting was in October of 2016, Republicans were then making the argument that it should still stay with a 4-4 split, as opposed, and actually when I say stay with a 4-4 split, that there should be some type of constitutional amendment, so to speak. Well, not amendment, but some type of act of Congress, the first that would have happened since 1868, to allow for the Supreme Court to go from 9 to 8. There are a number of people who don't realize that the Supreme Court numbers have morphed since 1787. They have been as few as 5. There have been as many as 10, and it has been 9 since 1868. With that in mind, I have noticed that both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have quite deftly ignored the question at the debates, will you pack the courts? And I understand if I was advising them, I would tell them too, you don't have to answer that. But I can ask you all this. So Corey, I'm coming at you first. If Joe Biden is the president come January 20th, and if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to make a 6-3 conservative to liberal split on the Supreme Court, should the Biden administration push to pack the Supreme Court to balance out that 6-3 split? What's your thoughts, Corey?
To reiterate something that Joyce said a little earlier, to keep from using inappropriate language, absolutely. It's maddening, man. And I write this all the time about being maddening and being maddened about some things. But these folks have been on a, we talk about since 2016. I talk about since 72, or even really 65 and 64. They've been on a 40-50 year war with respect to the courts. They finally gotten to where they want to be, and they will go through hell and high water to put forth this sixth conservative justice. They played a joke on us in, what was that, 92 or 91 or 92 with Clarence Thomas, with the cynical pick, hey, let's fill Thurgood Marshall's seat with a conservative black who'll do our bidding. That way they can't say, you know, they can't make that one argument that they always make. They're doing the same thing right now. Ruth Bader Ginsburg went home to glory, and they're going to put another woman in that seat. But again, in a cynical way, they're putting somebody in there that's antithetical to everything that Ruth Bader Ginsburg stood for and fought for. So we can't come with the, you know, the misogyny argument. So yeah, they don't play by the rules. They never have. They showed us that time and time and time again, as Ayanna said. When it's good for them, they'll find an excuse. When it's, you know, tilted towards, you know, the other side, they'll make up something and change the rules. They move the goalposts all the time. So Biden, I think Biden and Harris have done a good job at not answering that question, which to me, you know, encourages me even more to the fact that, to the point that, to the fact that they are probably open to the idea of expanding the court. I would like to see maybe 11 or even 13. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And with that, Joy, last, what are your thoughts on that? Should Joe Biden and Kamala Harris stack the courts? It would be the first Democratic administration to even consider it since FDR in the mid 1930s. Should that be one of the first and foremost options on the agenda after January 20th?
I think if they can get away with it, they should give it a shot. I think they potentially could. I personally am partial to the number 13. I think it sounds good. So, hey, why not? But if they do, now you've got 13 justices on the Supreme Court. And we're going to be back here again in a generation. There will be more and more conservatives, or whatever is conservative at that time. You're always going to have that give and take. It may do us well in the short term, but ultimately, you know, I can foresee, you know, if I go to the extreme, well, 13 is not enough. Let's do 15. You know what? Let's just have one Supreme Court justice for every state, and it'll become a state thing. And then, well, what about Puerto Rico and DC? You know, so it could go on and get really ridiculous. And I know I sound ridiculous, but we're living in ridiculous times. So should they pack the court? I can't call it. I'm not in the judiciary system enough to understand it. Can they? Maybe. Depends on how the Senate turns. But if they do, this is the same problem with filibustering, the same problem with gerrymandering. Each side can use these crazy tools to their advantage. So if they pack it to 13 or 11 or whatever, who's to say that if the Republicans get back into power in 2024, 2028, next thing you know, we got 17 justices. And eventually, where does it stop? You know, so the issue is, don't let stuff get to the Supreme Court. Let's focus on the lower level courts where we can knock stuff down without it becoming so appellate that next thing you know, the Supreme Court is trying local cases. You know, so let's not focus. Yes, there are absolutely things that need to go that far to set precedent, et cetera. But let's stand on some older precedents and hopefully get more, I'd say not necessarily liberal, because I know that has a bad spin to it sometimes, but more open-minded and flexible judges at the state and local levels. And then we don't have to worry so much about everything going to the Supreme Court.
Joy, while I have you, you shared in the group served earlier today also an interesting article that takes us into the last topic of the evening about the HBCUs and concerns that the latest executive order from President Trump could actually put funding in peril. Now, what was interesting about that article to me is that one thing that has surprised me over the last 4 years is that when I listened to Walter Kimbrough and FAMU President Larry Robinson and other HBCU presidents, that there has been some surprise that the Trump administration has either provided funding to HBCUs either equal to or in some years even greater than some years in the Obama-Biden administration. But now with this latest news about the executive order, I was trying to figure out whether this was just political posturing, so to speak, to rile up his base, or if there is a second Trump administration. Do you believe that any funding gains that we have seen from the Trump administration over the last 4 years may be at risk? What are your thoughts on that, Joy?
So I think that if this executive order takes root or goes through, you're going to see people use it the way they want to use it. I've already seen it because I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant in my daytime job. And I've received, and some of my colleagues have received, cease and desist letters when we talk about, would you like to receive training on diversity, diversity refresher training? You want to talk about unconscious bias? Do you want to talk about the concept of privilege, et cetera? I do 2-hour classes on this stuff on almost daily basis. And I have started to receive messages, can you scrub your training of these words? Can you not say white privilege? Can you not say white supremacy? Can you not say racism? Sure, I cannot say those words. You're going to get this work. I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you, but I can say unconscious advantage instead of white privilege. I can say discrimination instead of racism, because you're going to hear what I got to say. But that's me. And I shouldn't have to jump through all those hoops just to do the job you paid me to do. But it expands. At first, it was just government entities. Then it was anybody that's a government contractor. Now it's anybody that takes federal money. And the way that executive order is written, basically, everybody in the country has some tie to the federal government. So what he's trying to do, and what his minions and whoever wrote that, because he didn't write it, whoever wrote that for him is trying to do, is silence all minority voices. Don't say nothing bad about white people no more. That's what they want to have happen. That in conjunction with this idea of patriotic education turns us into 1984. It turns us into a nation that doesn't even understand who it really is and how to get out of what they've become. In a generation, we could see a reversion all the way back to 1877.
That's an interesting point there. And again, as we are into the last topic for the evening, I have noticed that this year, more than any, and I'm not sure how many of you ladies are strong followers of the college sports game, but I know Corey and I, we have a group of friends and we talk nonstop via text messages and DMs with regards to what's going on in college sports as well. And I can tell you that there are a number of young Black high school athletes that are making the shift to either indicating that they will sign with an HBCU or outright signing with HBCUs. I am also reading that there has been a resurgence in the number of applications across the country to HBCUs, one that we probably have not seen since the late 80s when we all were preparing to go to college, when school days came out in a different world, and it was the golden age of the modern era of historically Black colleges and universities. With that in mind, do you think that it actually is a great benefit for some of these persistent attacks on affirmative action, on pushes to keep Black students from being able to, as Joy just alluded to, even discuss on these campuses issues about systemic white racism and things of that nature? Do you think it's actually important for the survival long term of our colleges? Who wants to go first?
I'm coming back, Chuck. I'm pulling the card. I'm saying something else.
Go ahead.
Sorry, y'all, but not sorry. So, so if you think about it, again, going back to this ordinance, this executive order that he's trying to put through, if you say that no federal money can be used towards something that they deem as reverse racism or a negative impact on American culture, et cetera, Black colleges, historically Black colleges and universities were formed because of systemic racism. We're excluded from going here, so we'll make our own. And now I've had discussions with people that wonder, how is it possible that you have a college that's all Black? Isn't that racist? And if that becomes the case, you can't bring a Pell Grant to an HBCU under that misunderstanding or misuse of language. You can't have any federal money and attend. So a lot of these football players that could potentially want to go to an HBCU may be banned if their scholarship is federal related. And there's a whole lot of people getting loans and grants, et cetera. What happens if, because those loans and grants are backed by federal money, you can't use it at an HBCU? So now you got to go to whatever Pac-10 school they want you to go to play ball, because that's the only way you get this scholarship. That's holding Black people hostage.
That's an interesting point. And with that, I want to actually start with Ursula, then I'm going to go to Corey, and then I'm going to finish up with Ayanna. Ursula, what ultimately made you decide when you were a senior in high school at Mound Bayou to go to Spell?
Get it right, Chuck.
You and Vinny Vegas. I know Vinny Vegas gonna want to put me in the cut about messing up y'all's hometown. Right. So go ahead, and what made you decide on Spelman College?
Okay, I'm gonna flex a little bit and say I went to Spelman after my
All
junior
right
year.
now.
Just had to flex a little bit. But I'll tell you, my dad told me, of course, because I decided to go after my 11th grade year, I had to apply to colleges that had early admissions programs. My family historically went to Tougaloo College in Mississippi, which is where I thought I would go. My dad told me I could go to any college I wanted to, that I got into, but he was sending my tuition money to Spelman. So if I wanted, some money to go to school, I probably needed to go to Spelman. And that's how I ended up going there. And it was, of course, the best decision that could have been made for me. Now, what you will see, I picked up on something Joy was talking about, that we have the potential to revert. But this generation of young kids reminds me of the generation of young kids from the early 1960s. They are seeing things that we didn't see. And that's why you see the athletes who were that were committed to some of these big colleges that are now saying, I'm actually going to a HBCU instead. And I'm ecstatic about that, because for me, I love to see young Black kids go to HBCUs. I think you get a nurturing at HBCUs that you don't get at those predominantly white institutions. But in order for that to happen and for that to be a successful mission for us, we have got to work on giving. Our schools, our HBCUs are not equipped to give the type of money that these other PWIs are giving. And we have to start giving to these schools. Mississippi Valley State just had a giving day yesterday. And they did as much advertising as they could possibly do. And they wanted everybody to contribute $40. And I guarantee you that if this was homecoming weekend, Mississippi Valley State would be full to capacity of alums. Okay. But yesterday, or 10/10, they raised $12,000. Now, if you gave $40, that's roughly 300 people. There will probably be 10,000 to 15,000 people at Valley's homecoming, if not more. And all they got was $12,000. If everybody would just commit what they were going to spend for homecoming to give it to their alma maters, we would probably raise millions of dollars in a matter of weeks. So, in order for some of this stuff to come to fruition, we're going to have to change our attitudes about, how we approach this thing. I know we're trying to watch our language, but damn that executive order. At this point, the Black community has enough resources to do a better job of funding these HBCUs. And we have to do something to get people excited and passionate about that.
Ursula, I'm with you on that. And I think about when I took a trip to Tuskegee when I was in 10th grade. And when I walked around that campus, and that was one of the schools I actively considered, I was seriously considering Morehouse, Howard, FAMU, Tuskegee, and Southern when I was coming out of high school. But in 10th grade, when I was on the Tuskegee campus, and I was able to see all of those buildings. And when the tour guide told us that our ancestors built those all by hand, there wasn't government money for it. It was Booker T. Washington out there raising money, and it was Black tradesmen and masons out there working to erect those buildings that still stood. That meant a lot to me. And I think that harkens to the crux of what it is you're saying too, about it is on us to make sure that our institutions thrive. Corey, with that, I know you thought about going to FAMU and Morehouse. What made you ultimately decide to head to Morehouse and precede the other Florida boys by 1 year in Graves Hall, one time for G5?
One time for Graves. Well, guys, I'm a first generation college student. My parents, neither one of them went to college. My dad, born in 1928, right here in South Florida, didn't make it past 8th grade. My mom finished high school and got to raising kids. So, my sister was the first to go. My brother was the first to graduate. I'm the second to graduate. My brother and sister went to Brown University and University of Florida, respectively. So I wasn't even exposed to HBCUs. What exposed me to HBCUs, and I think, you know, the point I'm going to make here is that you know, media matters. We have to continue to represent, you know, advocate for the representation of our schools and media, because my real first exposure to an HBCU was School Days is a Different World in the Cosby Show. School Days being the solidifier of where I wanted to go to school. Took a trip up to Tallahassee in 11th or 12th grade in the, what was that, the fall of 88, or the spring of, either the spring of 89 or the fall of 88. It was 12th grade. And I saw FAMU, and I had my mind so, my heart so set on Morehouse, I didn't apply to anywhere else. But as y'all know, in the admissions office, I didn't get a reply back to April. So around March, I got kind of nervous about not going anywhere and being stuck here in Palm Beach County, and that wasn't happening. So I applied to FAMU because that was the only other school that I even considered. So that said, when I got the acceptance letter to Morehouse, obviously it was one of the best day that, to date in my life. Having been, that experience, I don't have to tell y'all how life-changing that experience is up there in the AUC. So, as Ursula said, and to Joy's point about the executive order, damn that order, but what's really interesting is that, that kind of dovetails into the court challenges against that executive order that would come up if, the situation were to arise where they started trying to cut off money to HBCUs because it violated the executive order. And then that goes back to the appointment of justices to decide those issues. So, the bottom line is that we got to vote, man. We got to vote. We got to vote like crazy this time. We got to drag our cousins out, the ones who, talking about they're the same, when we all know that that's a bunch of BS, from the pits of hell. But they just don't understand it. And we got to be that, not to sound arrogant, we got to be that light, to let them know that, hey, man, you got to get out here and vote, because it does matter and it does affect you, whether you know it or not. And like somebody else said, up and down the ticket, state and local. And that's it for me, man. We just got to vote. But yeah, school days.
Amen, brother. Amen. And I'm sure you tried to take Reverend Guy's class on the off chance of seeing Jasmine. I know I did. And when I got in there,
ain't no I was in Reverend Guy's class.
No doubt.
Hoping she come back, but she didn't make that appearance, man.
Not at all, man. I know, right? And boy, folks were in there struggling to get those B's and A's out of Reverend Guy's class. I'm like, dude, I just wanted to see Jasmine. I didn't know that it was going to be like this first year. But with that, I appreciate that, Corey. Ayana,
I got a law school hook out of Reverend Guy.
Hey, for sure. Ayana, what made you decide on Spelman College, sister?
Okay, so several things. So first of all, my parents are Howard alum. I grew up on practically on Howard's campus, but they told me, you got to go. You cannot stay home. And my father had a chance encounter with Marian Wright Edelman and found out that she attended Spelman. So he decided for me. And then, of course, being rebellious, I decided that I was going to look at other institutions, which I did, but I went down for a visit, and of course, the rest is history. So Spelman has been obviously one of the best decisions of my life. I wanted to say a couple things before we move on. I thought about that executive order, and the thing that's so interesting to me is that, part of the thing that gets touted over and over again about all these Black supporters is how the Trump administration is the best administration for Black people since Abraham Lincoln. And the first thing they talk about is his funding and support of HBCUs. So it seems ironic to me that then this particular executive order, which jeopardizes that talking point, then sort of sends a message to me just how much that really was just a talking point. And then the other thing is, I'm wearing my HBCU Just Give t-shirt just to sort of hone in and support that other point that Corey made and that Ursula made. We just got to give. So we've got to also recognize that the investment that we make in our institutions is an investment not only in our future, but it's also an investment in the future for those who come after us. Those who came before us already paid it forward. So it's now our turn to pay it forward to them as well. So that's what brought me here. Just Howard University. I'm a baby bison, but I'm bleed Spelman blue always.
No, I totally understand. I appreciate that. And similarly, my parents were FAMU Rattlers, and I grew up on the campus and ultimately got a master's degree from the school as well. But my heart was set on Morehouse as a little boy. And it was one of the greatest days, like Corey said, when that acceptance letter came through the mail. And I'm very glad that I actually chose to enroll there. And you all have been great. I totally agree that on this last piece, it is important for us to support our schools however you can. One of the great things about funding in the modern era is that through PayPal and other source links, you can pay as little as $10, $15, $20 a month. What you would pay to go get a 2-piece with red beans and rice and a strawberry soda from Popeyes could actually help with the bottom line of so many HBCUs. And so we have to place ourselves into that mindset of making sure that we give back to the schools that have done so much for so many of our people throughout the last century and a half. With that, I also, as I thank each of you for taking time out this evening to be on this panel, I want to say that I hate that we will not be able to fellowship later this week. But again, kudos to Spelman, kudos to Morehouse and all of the HBCUs who have taken the coronavirus seriously, who are placing the health and welfare of Black people and their students and faculty at the vanguard, as opposed to profit and other issues that we are seeing at our PWIs, where profit is the bottom line. Last, as many of my panelists have said this evening, as I thank each of you who have watched this evening, I want to make sure that you remember to go vote. I know that it is a struggle to stand in line for 4, 5, or 6 hours, but you know what? Back in 1999, when the first Star Wars was coming out since 1983's Return of the Jedi, it was The Phantom Menace. I actually stood in line for almost 9 hours to get my tickets for that show. And in my brain, if I can stand in line for 9 hours to watch a 2-hour and 20-minute Star Wars, I can stand in line for as long as I need to vote, especially recognizing that I actually knew my grandparents and great-grandparents that spent the majority of their lives unable to vote because of Jim Crow repression. So with that in mind, it is serious business. Let's make sure that we handle it. I saw that one of our SpelHouse classmates, Darlene Whittington, made a comment about pick up people, take them to the polls, do what you have to do, but get people there, make sure you exercise your right to vote, and let's reconvene here in a few weeks once the election results are done so we can talk about the post analysis and what we should expect either from a Biden-Harris administration or a second Trump administration. So with that, I thank my panelists again for appearing this evening, and I thank everybody who watched. And the last thing that I want to say is many of you who follow me on Facebook probably see that every October 12th, I put up a post to the late Chris Henry. That was my best friend for a number of years. He died in October of 1992, 28 years ago tonight, as a matter of fact. I got the call sitting in my dorm room in Kilgore Hall, sitting across from Victor Owens, when a longtime friend of mine named Leslie Jones called and let us know that Chris had died in Tallahassee. That impacted my life far greater than probably anything up to that point. And I think about him and his family every single day. And so with that, Chris, I hope that everything that I am trying to do in life makes you proud, brother. And we're going to continue to strive and keep on. With that, good night. God bless. I look forward to speaking to you next Monday night on Hobbservation Point Live.